one line from the top, second to the second line. Amar Rabbi Elazar. We're supposed to have learning. Should be a panacea. Then Amar Rabbi Elazar Mishim Bar Kapara. Rabbi Elazar says in the name of Bar Kapara, Aimer Hayar Reb Meir. Reb Meir would say, Ivari Eilish and Itaisru, the limbs of a carbon Eila that are left over. In other words, they didn't get burned immediately. And now that they are in the evening, you make a separate fire for them. They don't get burnt on the original fire that the Eila is burnt. You make a separate fire for them and they get burnt on that other fire. And then he adds in Vafilu b'Shabbos, and you do this even on Shabbos. Now the chiddush over here is not that you burn the carbon tamid on Shabbos. That's not a chiddush. Chiddush is that it was on Friday. It was Friday's carbon, and it got left over, and I'm burning Friday's carbon on Friday night on a separate fire. So that's what we're saying. Now, this is not much of a chiddush, because yesterday we learned, the whole thing isn't much of a chiddush, because yesterday we learned that there was a whole machlokes, how many fires that were on the Mizbeach. We had the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that said there's usually only 2. Rabbi Yisrael says there's 3. And Rabbi Meir says there's always 4. And there's a 5th one, B'Yom Kippur. Now, Rabbi Meir's 4 was the Maracha Gedaila, the Maracha Shniya Shel Keteres. That's the first 2 that everyone agrees to. Then there was Kiyam Aish. There was an extra fire to enhance the other fires if it needed be. And then there was a Varim U'Pedarim Shleinis Aklu. There was another fire for those other ones I think get burnt. So Reb Meir said this anyway. But we have Reb Meir saying this in the Brisa before. This was a Tana Rabbanan. Now I have Rabbi Elazar saying in the name of Bar Kapara. So the Gemara says, "My Kamash Malan, Tanina b'chol yom hayisham arba marachas." Oh yeah, the Gemara saying that. So we learned already that every day there were 4 marachas. Was that in the Tana Rabbanan? What about in our Mishnah? Reb Meir in the Mishnah said that. It was, yeah, I'm quoting the Brisa, but it was really Reb Meir in the Mishnah said it. So it's even a Mishnah. Right? You get the question? Why do I need Bar Kapara to tell me that you burn it on another fire? The Mishnah says that. It's a big chiddush. The chiddush is that if the carbon was puzzle, but nevertheless, it happened to be one of those psulim that goes on the altar. It was on the altar. And it's the type that you don't take it off once it's up. So you started burning it and it didn't finish. You take those other, the ones that think it burn, you burn it on an independent fire. It gets its own fire to burn. Now he goes on, he says, V'dafka shemashla b'mar. It's only if it was started to get burnt, it becomes lachma shel mizbeach, becomes already the food of the mizbeach, and then you have to finish burning it. But if it did not become, if it wasn't, if those limbs did not start to get burnt, like a little scorched, singed, so then it doesn't get an independent fire. What do you do with it? I guess you put it on the regular fire. It doesn't get its independent fire. Yeah, I don't know the significance of this independent fire that it's only mashla ben mahar. Okay, ikadami there. Those that learn this the following way: echad kshein rechad psulin, imashla ben mahar in ilai. We were learning that ksherim, if the sacrifice was valid, and the Ivarim, the limbs, did not get burned, they go onto this independent fire. Psulim, then it depends. Invalid sacrifices that would happen to be on the altar anyway. Then it depends. If it started to get singed by the original fire, then it's already lach mishal mizbeach, then it will go to the independent fire if it didn't get totally burned. But if not, if it was never singed, then it would stay on the original fire. It probably was just fell on the side. Otherwise, would it just leave it there and let it get burned? Right. So we're probably talking about where you have to readjust it for it to. You didn't have racks. Now, according to the Kadamri, both ksherim and psulim only go to the independent fire if those avarim were already begun to be burnt by the original fire. Yeah, the actual mitzvah, in other words, when it says you put the chalev on the fire, so I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I think the chalev goes on the original fire. Now there's other parts of the animal that are supposed to go on the fire, so those it depends, and that's we're putting it on another fire if it didn't get finished. Okay, now the Gemara says, "Vafilu b'Shabbos." One of the things that Bar Kapara told us is that this is done. You put it on another fire, even on Shabbos. Now, the Gemara asks the same question. Tanina, b'Hayom Chamesh. If you go back to the Mishnah and to the Brisa, we had that the mayor says that there's 4, but b'Hayom there's Chamesh. But today on Yom Kippur there's 5 fires. What's the extra one? Well, the extra one is for the Malay Chafna, for the Ketores. There's an extra Ketores here, so you need an extra fire. But one of the 4 is a Varamu Padarm Shlei Nesakla. That's one of the 4. I'm not replacing the Yom Kippur fire with the fire that wouldn't be necessary because it's Yom Kippur. I'm not going to burn Erev Yom Kippur's Karbanis on Yom Kippur. So, thank you. But it turns out that I am. I have not only 4, I have 5 karbanos. 5 fires. And one of those is to burn yesterday's Evarim Padam Shleim Saklu. So basically the Mishnah says the same thing. Why do I need Bar Kapara to tell this to me? Amar Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Yitzchak. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says, no, it's necessary. There's a chiddush here. Sal Kadait Chamina. Could have thought, Hani Mili, Hechad B'chal Yom Kippur L'Yisachar Shabbos. Yeah, that would have been quite a tight situation if Yom Kippur was Sunday. So then I had the carbon of Shabbos. The carbon of Shabbos would have went, are supposed to be burnt on Shabbos, that's not a problem. But what happens if it didn't get burnt? And now it's already Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur is considered holier than Shabbos. And the rule would be the Chelvei Shabbos craven the Yom Kippur. You'd be allowed to burn the fats of Shabbos, the Evarim of Shabbos on Yom Kippur. Maybe because it's like one Kedusha. Maybe because Yom Kippur is holier than, if it would be holier than Shabbos, is that a reason to burn it on Shabbos, or the opposite? If Shabbos would be holier than Yom Kippur, then that would maybe be a reason to burn Shabbos on Yom Kippur. Maybe not. Whatever, there's an association Shabbos and Yom Kippur which would allow the Karbanos of Shabbos to be burnt on Yom Kippur. Aval be'emtza Shabbos doesn't mean the middle of Shabbos, but in the middle of the week, if Yom Kippur was in the middle of the week, to take weekday Karbanos and to burn those on Yom Kippur because they didn't end up being finished, that I would say no. Like Kamash Malan, so comes along Bar Kapara to tell me that yes, there is an extra fire to burn weekday Karbanos on Yom Kippur. Now, our idea over here is that if I can do it on Yom Kippur, I can do it on Shabbos. So when Bar Kapara says Afilu b'Shabbos, when he's quoting Reb Meir, Afilu b'Shabbos, coming to tell me that even that just because I know that on Yom Kippur I'm allowed to burn Erev Yom Kippur's Karbanis, that doesn't tell me that I would have been allowed to do that in the middle of the week. Now what I'm getting is that I'm allowed to burn weekday Karbanis on Shabbos. And weekday Karbanis probably on Yom Kippur as well. Yeah, it didn't say that clearly. I would have gotten that from the Mishnah, I would have understood just that Shabbos Karbanis I can burn on Yom Kippur. And Bar Kapara tells me that weekday Karbanis could be burnt on Shabbos. Yeah, by extension, I assume that would mean that I can burn weekday Karbanis on Yom Kippur as well. But it doesn't spell that out. Yeah. When we learned the Mishnah, I think we would have understood plain that on what was the fifth fire for? That was because on Erev Yom Kippur they brought a carbon tamid. If it didn't get finished burning, you would burn it Yom Kippur by night. That's what we would have understood. We wouldn't have made this whole thing only on Shabbos. Now we're creating this chiddush that there's a difference in order to fit Bar Kapara, and he should also have a chiddush. Hey, Amar Rava. Rava says, "Man hai lechayesh lekimche." Who's this person that's not concerned about his own flour? I think it means that he's not careful with his teachings. Maybe it means like flour has to be ground and something, and he's not grinding it well. He's not looking at it. Now, I think there's another girsa that says lechayesh lekamei. He doesn't look in front of him, which also it's the same idea. Now, this is Rava seems to be criticizing Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. It says in the Mishnah that every day there were 4 marachas. And on Yom Kippur there was a 5th. Now every day means Sunday through Shabbos. You're telling me, according to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, the Mishnah never told me about Shabbos. The Mishnah was only telling me from Sunday to Friday, and then the 5th one on Yom Kippur was only necessary if Yom Kippur came after Shabbos. But that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says b'chol yom, which means I always knew that Friday karbanos are burnt on Shabbos, even without Bar Kapara, because kol yom means every day. So the Gemara says kasha. That's a question. Yeah. Where did I see the person over here say that it's not such a strong question? It's a question, but they make a difference between kasha and tiyufta. If it says tiyufta, that's a big deal. But kasha, as you'll see, it's not such a big problem. Let's look a line further, you'll see. Upliga de Rav Huna. He argues on Rav Huna. Now Rav Huna is also on Amayra. Damar tchilasai daicha, saifai eina daicha. Rav Huna says that the carbon tamid could be brought on Shabbos. That's fine. But saifai, if it's yesterday's carbon and it needs to be burnt, eina daicha Shabbos. It doesn't get burnt on Shabbos. You see, there is an opinion that holds that yes, that weekday karbanos cannot be burnt on Shabbos. What that comes out is that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov really had a point when he said that I wouldn't have known this from the Mishnah. As you see, Rav Huna, who knows the Mishnah, doesn't hold of it anyway. So Rava's statement of Habachol Yaim Tanan, but it says you have to do it every day. Obviously, Rav Huna didn't agree with that. And so therefore the kasha in Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is not a very strong kasha, because you see Rav Huna continues and he doesn't agree with that. Right? He says that Seifa Yena Daicha. On Shabbos, I would not need an extra fire to burn the karbanos from Friday. Okay, Gufa. Now we go back to examine the statement of Rav Huna. We said the difference between Amar Mar and Gufa is that Amar Mar is explaining a brisa, and Gufa is explaining an Amira, which fits with our Gufa. Let's go back to the original statement of Rav Huna. Amar Rav Huna. Tamid gives us an extra word there. Tamid tchilase daicha seipen daicha. It pushes off Shabbos. Tamid pushes off Shabbos. However, the end of the carbon tamid doesn't push off Shabbos. Yeah, the carbon tamid of Shabbos is burnt on Shabbos. We're talking about just an end of a Friday carbon tamid. That's what we're discussing. Now we said Seifa Yenedeicha doesn't push off, but we didn't elaborate and say that we're talking about Shabbos. So the Gemara asks, "My Yenedeicha? What does it mean it doesn't push off?" Rav Chizda Amar Deiches a Shabbos, ve'ina Deiches a Tuma. Rav Chizda says that yesterday's carbon, Friday's carbon, is burnt on Shabbos. So what did Rav Huna mean? Seifa Yene Deicha? That would mean that if the congregation was tamei, or all the kayanim are tamei, I still bring a carbon tamid, right? It could be the karbanos could be brought betuma. It's deicha. Certain karbanos, the karbanos tzibur. We learn it from the pasuk from Mayadai that it has to be brought in its time, even betuma. But what about the end of a carbon if it wasn't burnt? Do I have to burn that also betuma? In other words, I know I offer it up, but what happens if there's things that are left over? Do you continue in tuma burning the carbon? So Rav Chizda says no. Okay, now the Gemara says Virava Amar, and if there's a correction on the side, it's supposed to be Virava. I like Virava better because Rava is a son-in-law of Rav Chizda, and Rabba is a friend of Rav Chizda. And when there's machlokes, it's usually fits better when it's the contemporaries. They're discussing also a son-in-law. It's not only a son-in-law; it's also a student. So Rabba and Rav Chizda fits nicely. Oh, yeah. Rav Nassim saying that the fact that it's son-in-law and father-in-law is not the big raya. It's the Rambam. Yeah. Okay. Quotes the Rambam. He said a week ago said that my father holds this, but I disagree. So. Okay, so Rabba Amar Deichas Atama Beina Deichas Shabbos. Rabba says differently. Rabba says that once the carbon started to be brought, if the kayanim are tamei, you continue bituma. You continue bringing it, even though it's the base of the sacrifice is you've already fulfilled. You've already slaughtered it and sprinkled the blood and all of that. But nevertheless, seifa, you complete the sacrifice bituma, even though the kayanim are impure. However, when it comes to Shabbos, I don't burn the end of a sacrifice, end of Friday's sacrifice. I don't burn that on Shabbos. Now, the reason why we would like this to be, let's say this was Rava. If it would be Rava, we would have another problem. Because Rava held before that I do burn the end of the sacrifice on Shabbos. It's got to be Rava. Now we have two reasons. One because I like it better, the other one because it doesn't fit. Okay. Amalei Abaya, this is getting confusing. You have to see Abaya is a student of Rabba. He's a friend of Rabba. So Amalei Abaya l'Rabba, l'didach, let's say it's Rabba. L'didach kasha, l'Rav Chizda kasha. Yeah, there's no problem. If he's ready to argue with Rav Chizda, to ask a question on Rav Chizda, he can ask on Rabba also. He tells Rabba, he says, there's a question on you and there's a question on Rav Chizda. There's Abaya. both of his teachers. What's the question on you, on Rabbah? What's the question on Rav Chisda? L'didach kasha. According to you, there's a question. In other words, Rabbah held that Shabbos does not get over. You don't override Shabbos for yesterday's carbon, for Friday's carbon. You only override Tumah for the end of the sacrifice. We're talking about Seifa, the end of the sacrifice. Maishna Tumah. Why do you say that you override Tumah? Because the pasuk says B'mayadai, and you think that the end of the sacrifice is also significant. So when it says B'mayadai, that you have to bring the sacrifice even b'tumah, it says Mayadai afila b'tumah. Well, guess what? Shabbos nami b'mayadai v'afila b'Shabbos. It depends how you want to look at the sacrifice. If you want to view the end of the sacrifice as critical, then if it pushes off tumah, it should push off Shabbos. It's the same pasuk. Now we understand already the question on Rav Chisda. It's the same question. Rav Chisda kasha, and according to Rav Chisda, there's also a question. Why does Rav Chisda say that it pushes off Shabbos, the end of the sacrifice? Well, guess what? The same limud, b'mayadai, that tells me that you have to bring the sacrifice in its time, even if there's a problem here. What's the problem? Shabbos or Tumah. It's the same way. That should, if at the end of the sacrifice is that critical, then you have to bring it on Shabbos and Tumah, or none. Amalei. So Rabbah responds to Abaye. He says, "Leila didi kasha v'leila Rav Chisda kasha." I don't have a problem, and you also, and Rav Chisda also doesn't have a problem. It's interesting how he's going to explain this. L'didi like kasha, I don't have an issue. Again, he held that it doesn't push off, the end of the sacrifice doesn't push off Shabbos. It only pushes off Tumah. He says, "Seifa kitchilasei." I always compare the end of the sacrifice to the beginning of the sacrifice. It goes like this. Tumah, when it comes to Tumah, tchilasei bar mitcha, Tumahu seifanami dachi. The beginning of the sacrifice could have pushed off Tumah. You slaughter the sacrifice if everyone's stomach. Even though they're impure, you still bring the sacrifice. If that's the case, then the end of the sacrifice is also brought, even b'tumah. In other words, the end has the same status as the beginning. So then why don't I bring the sacrifice on Shabbos? So it's like this. Shabbos, the tchilasi lav bar mitcha, balav bar mitcha Shabbos, so seifanami leidachi. He has an interesting point. He says, which sacrifice are we talking about? The Korban Tamid of Friday. The Friday's Korban Tamid does not push off Shabbos, at least not the Shrita, not the beginning. So if the beginning of the Friday sacrifice doesn't push off Shabbos, Friday is a week thing. So the end of the sacrifice also doesn't push off. He says, I always compare the end to the beginning, which is great. Now it matches up. The beginning of the sacrifice could have pushed off Tumah, so the end pushes off Tumah. But Friday doesn't push off Shabbos, so the end doesn't push off. The Rav Chisda like kasha. What's it going to do for Rav Chisda? It's exactly the opposite. It goes like this. Seifei kitchilasei leslei. You have to read it, you see. The end is not like the beginning. He doesn't hold of my opinion. He's on Rabbah's understanding of Rav Chisda's opinion. He doesn't hold that everything has to be similar, the end to the beginning. Shabbos, he views it differently. Shabbos, the hutri hibetzibur seifanami dachi. When it comes to Shabbos, we had a machlekes in Psachim. If you say, when it comes to Tumah, if it's Dechuya or Hutra, Dechuya means that it overrides it, and Hutra means that it's permissible. The difference was, if I'm able to find the Kayan that's pure, do I have to go and find him to be able to bring the sacrifice? Or do I just say, well, it's permitted, so just do it. It's permitted anyway, there's no shayla. When it comes to Shabbos, overriding Shabbos, we say Hutra. It's totally permissible. You don't have to do it in a way that to lessen the Chil Shabbos. No, there is no prohibition of Shabbos when it comes to the Karban. So if that's the case, Shabbos is Hutra. So then you bring the whole sacrifice. However, Hutra b'tzivar is the Seifanami dachi. Tumah the Dechuya b'tzivar. But when it comes to Tumah, which it's not permissible, it's just overrides Tumah, so then I have to be careful. I can only bring the Iker Kapara. Tchilasi the Iker Kapara dachi. Seifei the Lav Iker Kapara lei dachi. I can only bring the main part of the sacrifice. which that's the critical part. Anything that's not critical, you don't do. Yeah, one time I had to go with one of my kids to the hospital on Shabbos. So it turned out there was a doctor there. No, there was a doctor there. He said, "I'll drive you." It was wild. It was anyway. He takes us to the emergency room. He like rushes us in, and the nurses didn't understand if it was the child, if it was the child of the doctor. He wanted to get us like they should take good care of us. So they anyway, they were so confused. They said, "Dr. Smith, come this way." The whole thing was confusing. You know what was going on. So anyway, he gets into the car. He turns on the air conditioning and puts on the music. Says, "Yeah, my rabbi allows this." He says, "When I drive Tutra, I don't know if it's really acceptable, but I'm sure there's leniencies for someone that has to drive regularly on Shabbos. He's allowed to drive back, even in certain cases, because he should be allowed to go. He should never be make a decision that he doesn't want to go because he's going to be stuck there for the whole Shabbos. At least that was the logic that he was giving me. I don't know the actual halachas. Anyway, okay. So Shabbos is hutra, and Tumah is dechuya, right? So that's why Rav Chisda would say that Tumah you don't do the end of the sacrifice, but Shabbos you do the end of the sacrifice, which means Friday's sacrifice, according to Rav Chisda, could be burnt on Shabbos on Friday night. Ki itmar was stated by Amoraim. This is usually a machlekes. When it says the word itmar, there's usually a machlekes that follows. Hamachabe eish machta u'menorah abaya merchayev Rav Amar Pater. You're not allowed to put out the fire on the mizbeach. It says clearly in the psukim, eish tamid to kadal mizbeach b'sech. But you're not allowed to put out the fire. But let's say you took the fire off the mizbeach and you put it into the fire pan because you're bringing it. The Kohen Gadol is going to bring it in for Yom Kippur. If he puts out the fire, I know it's a violation of Yom Kippur, but is he also violating putting out the fire of the mizbeach? It's not on the mizbeach, but it came from the mizbeach. But the same thing would be. Remember, we said that you take the fire for the menorah, you take it off the mizbeach. Now, if you put it out, oh, that's interesting, because he would have probably some sort of twig that he would use, like a match that he would light off the mizbeach. What would he do with the end of the match? Yeah, I guess he would put it down. You can't shake it. You can't. No, he was going to light the menorah. So what would he do? It would be a machlekes. Is he allowed to put it out? Well, actually, it doesn't say allowed. It just says pater. Abaya says that he's chayev for both of those situations. It's still considered the fire of the mizbeach. Rava says no, he's pater. If you put it out and you're on top of the altar, everyone agrees that you're chayev. We're talking about that you took it off the fire, you walk down, and you take it off the fire. You're down on the ground. Abaya says, well, it's the fire from the mizbeach. Says, yeah. How's he going to learn that? I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be a question if you're allowed to put it out. If it goes out on its own, that's not okay. Yeah, you're allowed to put it out. Yeah, but when I would read the pasuk, I would read Ala Mizbeach, that it would need to be on the altar. It says Ala Mizbeach. But okay, somehow maybe it means from on the mizbeach. So Rav Amar Pater even the natka. Rava says no, it's removed from the mizbeach. It's not on the mizbeach. It's not the fire of the mizbeach. Yeah, when it comes to Havdalah, there's a discussion if you can take fire from Avodah Zarah. From Avodah Zarah. Let's say the church had fire, and you need to make Havdalah, and you wanted to light your candle. Can you light it from the Avodah Zarah? Is the fire a substance? And is it is it considered when you take it off? Is it considered the fire of Avodah Zarah? Like how far would that go? Yeah. I don't remember the details of that, but it's clearly like one of the cases of Shulchan Aruch. Or a fire that was lit on Shabbos is another one. If it was lit with a violation of Shabbos, it could even take that. Anyway, okay, here we're talking about that it's removed from the Mizbeach. Rabbi says it's removed. Elahadam Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi Baravua. There's a problem. Rav Nachman said the name of Rabbi Baravua. Here's his father-in-law. We think it's Yalta's father. Hamayrid kachelas melgam mizbeach v'kiva is chayev. Someone takes a coal off the altar and he extinguishes it. He's chayev. Come on, who does this go like? Abaya. It's going to go like Abaya. Who said chayev? Abaya said chayev. There's a little bit of a problem because Abaya is not the halacha. Whenever there's a machlekes Abaya and Rava, the halacha is always like Rava, except for 6 cases. Yal Kagam, Gemara tells us. But so what's going on over here? Rabba Baravu is passing like Abaya. Gemara says no. I feel Rava. You could say if it's like Rava. Hasam le intik le mitzvase hache intika le mitzvase. Very interesting answer. Rava says that it becomes not a fire of the mizbeach. Why? Because you took it off for a different mitzvah. When you take it for a different mitzvah, that removes it from being a mizbeach fire, and makes it now a menorah fire or a ketores fire, not a mizbeach fire. Over there by Rabba Baravua, Rav Nachman, name of Rabba Baravua, you were taking it off not for another mitzvah. You were just taking it off for no reason, just to take. So now it's still, you never put on it a new mitzvah, so it's still considered a fire of the mizbeach. Yeah, they bring a raya from this. The Meretz brings a raya that if you hold mitzvahs don't need kavanah, right? If you hold mitzvahs don't need kavanah, and you can perform a mitzvah without kavanah, then what about if you have a kavanah for a different mitzvah? He says that's going to be worse. If you have kavanah for it, he brings a raya from this. That when I'm taking it for the menorah, it becomes not the mizbeach. When I take it for no reason, it's still the mizbeach. Yeah, it's interesting. Ikadamri, there are those that say the achte ara v'kiboy the kuli amalei pligi the pater. Everyone holds that if it's on the ground, it's pater. It's off the mizbeach. This would fit better with the reading of Ishtam Tukar Alam mizbeach. Keep ligi the kavya bereisha shel mizbeach. The whole machlekes is if you're still on the mizbeach, but you removed it off the fire on the mizbeach, but you're up there on the mizbeach. Abaya amrachayev eish mizbeachu. Abaya says you're chayev because you're on the mizbeach and the fire is from the mizbeach. Rav Amar Pater kiven de natka. Rav says I know where you're standing, but it's not the mizbeach fire anymore because you took it off. You removed it from the fire. 1 second. He says that if you took it to the ground, you're chayev. We said everyone said pater. That's come on, like Habayo, like Rava. That's not going to fit with anyone. Where it says hasam over there, layintik lemitzvase. Over there, it wasn't taken off for a mitzvah. Hachintik lemitzvase. Everyone would agree if you took it off for a mitzvah and you took it onto the ground that there's no chiyuv. No machlekes if you take it off for a mitzvah and you're still on the mizbeach. Rabbi Baravu is talking about you didn't take it off for a mitzvah, so even off the mizbeach, it's still considered on the mizbeach. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, oh no, I think Chaim said he wasn't able to.